All right, everyone. So this week we continue to make a use of the tools of Marxist analysis, in particular to read the production and reproduction of culture. So I'm gonna go back quickly to the definition of ideology we looked at last week, which, as I said, is a definition introduced by Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels in the text The German Ideology. I just read a quote: "The ideas of the ruling class are in every epoch the ruling ideas. The class which has the means of material production at its disposal has control at the same time over the means of mental production." This means that the function of ideology is ultimately to guarantee the continual reproduction of the means of production and thereby to ensure the dominance of the ruling class. Ideology basically makes the division between the capitalist and the proletariat appear as natural rather than as the outcome of historical relations of power. And this leads in turn the subordinate classes, in the case of Marx, the factory workers he was referring to accept their alienated condition against which they would otherwise revolt. Now, Marx is writing this in the 19th century, and in particular to describe the conflict between the large industrial working class that is emerging from the UK and capitalist owners of the large factory plants. But in the 20th century, the capitalist economy begins to differentiate, and we see the emergence of new sectors of the economy that do not involve the production of material goods and of material commodities. So besides the industrial sector and the agricultural sector, we see the rise of the service economy, which includes many industries. We might think about transportation, we might think about finance, we might think about education. So new tools of Marxist analysis are introduced to read this internal differentiation of the economy, which brings with itself the emergence of new classes, and in particular of a new middle class, which is itself internally differentiated. Antonio Gramsci, important Marxist theorist of the first part of the 20th century, introduces the notion of hegemony to refer to the provisional alliances between different class sectors that shape consensus for the dominant class. Basically, the bourgeoisie is constantly shaping alliances with the middle class in order to maintain its power. This also means that hegemony is a moving equilibrium. Gramsci describes it as a moving equilibrium, that is to say, a contested terrain within which, but also against which, a limited critique of the dominant consensus can emerge. We might think about, for example, the more political hip-hop music, the rise of alternative media, or the use of social media, for example, to challenge specific power structures. And Gramsci also argues that one of the most effective ways of ruling is to shape common sense assumptions, right? This is the function of ideology, but is also the function of hegemony. And Stewart Hall, who is also an important cultural Marxist critic of the late part of the 20th century, adds that the media are one of the main sites where these assumptions are circulated. So we might think about, of course, the stereotype of the happy white middle class family that we've seen in so many sitcoms for most of the 20th century, but also about more general assumptions such as everyone wants to be successful, everyone wants to go on television, everyone wants to be rich, and so on and so forth. And common sense is difficult to detect because we're always immersed in it, and therefore we always partake to a certain extent in its reproduction. Yet there are moments in culture, as I said, in which common sense and the hegemony of the ruling classes is openly challenged. And Hebdige, in the book you're reading this week, argues that subcultures, or at least some specific subcultures, can be such sites of resistance. For example, punks re-signify ordinary objects such as safety pins, dog collars, trash bags to create a new dressing style that openly challenges the kind of dominant stereotypes and ways of dressing. For example, like the ripped blue jeans, right, that we now can purchase directly as ripped, was first introduced by punks. The punks started ripping their own pants or using worn out pants rather than buying new ones. So my questions are very simple. This week for this class, I'm asking you, by looking at the movie that you had to watch for today, The Filth and the Fury, how does this process of resignification, right, of changing the meaning of daily objects occur, right? How do the punks make that possible? And then the second question is about the Sex Pistols, which is the best known punk band that came out of the 1977 punk movement and subculture. How did they challenge the dominant ideology in the media, right? They had a lot of media exposure, and you can see in the movie at least a couple of moments in which the dominant ideology is expressly and consciously challenged by the Sex Pistols. So I'm asking you to, of course, watch the movie that was assigned for today and to answer these two questions by both reading the book and watching the movie. Thank you very much.